Runeterra's Resident Beyblade has spun his way to the bottom of every Riftbound tier list so far, and for good reason. With the worst play rate in all but one major event and not a single Day 2 appearance, Garen doesn't seem to have many redeemable qualities. That said, his lack of popularity has left him rather unexplored, which means he could have a wealth of potential yet to be discovered. I'm Rose with 4 Hearts, and today we're going to break down how to play Might of Demacia in the Origins format. Might of Demacia is a body and order legend with an ability that allows the player to draw 2 cards if they conquer a battlefield and have at least 4 units remaining at that battlefield after combat resolves. This legend naturally likes to take a straightforward, army-based approach to games that's all about amassing a large amount of might through a plethora of smaller units. With a legend and domain combination that's all about combat, Garen is a solid legend to pick up for new players who are looking to learn the game. We'll be taking a look at the general strategies for both Garen Rugged and Garen Commander for this breakdown, so you can get a feel for how each likes to build around the Might of Demacia legend. For Garen Rugged, we'll be looking at a Dazzling Aurora build that's designed for late game domination, and for Garen Commander, we'll be exploring a token army build that tries to make legitimate use of Garen's legend. The main appeal for the Garen Rugged Dazzling Aurora build is its ability to completely shut opponents out of the late game. The combination of Dazzling Aurora into Divine Judgment on back-to-back turns is one of the most oppressive combos in the game, if you can manage to actually get it off. Playing these cards in sequence will allow you to shrink your opponent's board and hand after pushing the game into a state where you'll be playing a high might unit for free every turn. This makes Garen somewhat special, as him and Set are the only 2 legends who currently have access to this strategy. Even without that combo, the body and order combination provides access to some pretty threatening top-end units. Between Harness Dragon, Deadbloom Predator, and Mountain Drake, this build has really strong units for Dazzling Aurora to make use of, that are oftentimes worth more than just their might. With Harness Dragon killing a unit when played, Deadbloom Predator playing itself to occupy battlefields, and cards like Challenge and Blast of Power available, this deck has plenty of ways to kill units in addition to traditional combat. The mere existence of one of these units in your base with these spells in hand can be more threatening than the unit going into a showdown themselves. And of course, like any other Dazzling Aurora deck, this build has excellent ramping capabilities thanks to Catalyst of Aeons and Mobilize. The obvious drawback here is that this core strategy is incredibly inconsistent. It's already hard enough to find a Dazzling Aurora and get it online in the first place, let alone finding another spell that's worth 7 energy after the 9 spent to play Dazzling. The body and order domains don't have quite as much early game draw support as other domains and are designed to be a bit more unit oriented, which can make it difficult to find key pieces. Another issue is how expensive this core strategy is. Because this combo costs 16 energy altogether, you're looking at 2 turns of investment minimum to get set up. It usually takes about 4 turns to play Dazzling Aurora if your deck is operating consistently, which means this deck doesn't see its core strategy play out until turn 5 at the earliest. This slow speed makes it easier for opponents to run you out of the game before you have the opportunity to shut them out with your combo. This isn't as much of an issue for other Dazzling Aurora decks, as they only rely on 1 key piece and supporting cards that keep their units alive, whereas this iteration is much more straightforward with no ways to protect its big units once they're on the board. The final and arguably more glaring issue with this deck is that it doesn't make any use of its legend and barely finds use in its chosen champion. Dazzling Aurora decks are hold-based decks that gradually roll out units every turn, and exclusively aim to score points in the mid and late game. This doesn't have any synergy with the Might of Demacia legend. This means you're playing every matchup without a legend, putting yourself at a massive disadvantage against every other deck. The biggest strength of the Commander build is its large conquer pushes. Between the plethora of small units and their ability to multiply with tokens, opponents always have to assume that you're only a turn away from going on the offensive. This can make it difficult for opponents to lock you down with targeting spells and abilities, as backup is just around the corner. What makes this overwhelming unit count possible is the rune acceleration found in the body domain. Unlike Dazzling Aurora, this build doesn't mind being active in the early game, which allows cards like Catalyst of Aeons and Mobilize to be played throughout the game to maintain a rune advantage as opposed to slamming them during your first few turns. Additionally, the order domain can be incredibly resourceful with its unit management. With cards like Victor Leader, Recruit the Vanguard, and Faithful Manufactor, among a couple others, this deck is never worried about not having pieces on board. The tricky part is just figuring out how to maximize them. The best way is usually to sacrifice their might with order spells and combat tricks, whether it's using Hidden Blade for the draw support, Facebreaker to nullify a large unit, or trading into larger units with Imperial Decree. The tokens created in this deck have an easy time creating positive trades. The main issue with this deck is how one-dimensional the strategy is. Might of Demacia takes a very straightforward approach to the body and order domains and playing a lot of units and sending them into combat. That's not to say there isn't any outplay potential, but it's not hard for opponents to catch on to the core strategy and make adjustments where they can. The lack of versatility results in the legend being pretty easy to shut down, so long as opponents prioritize their defense effectively. A key aspect of this deck flowing correctly is developing a hand size advantage that can be capitalized off of with a high rune count for cheap combos. But if opponents prevent your legend ability from ever going off, you'll have a hard time developing that hand advantage, which then makes it difficult to close out games. The easiest method here for opposing decks is through damage and removal spells. A large army is threatening even when comprised of mostly small units, but when a few of those pieces are taken away, the total might of what's left becomes much more manageable. And with a deck built around attempting conquers with a minimum of 4 units, it's hard to pilot this deck without risking some overextensions. And finally, the offense is just slow compared to other Conquer decks. This deck has no ways to accelerate units aside from Confront and the Legion ability on Darius Executioner. This not only means you'll be outpaced in terms of scoring, but you'll also be rather predictable and will usually be playing it to conquer battlefields against more aggressive decks. Like any other Dazzling Aurora deck, the opening turns for Garen Rugged are mostly focused on playing Mobilize and Catalyst of Aeons to stack runes. This is your top priority, as without the 9 runes on board, Dazzling Aurora can't be played. If you have a Forge of Future in hand, this period of the game is a great time to play and get a token in base. This token can be used to take a free conquer, since it'll likely be uncontested, or allow you to draw 2 cards with Hidden Blade. While you're channeling your runes and looking for Dazzling Aurora, your opponent will have all the tempo and will look to leverage that to score points. This is where spells like Cold the Weak and Hidden Blade become incredibly important for minimizing the damage done. Don't overdo it though, as both of these spells have a power cost. Lastly, look to play a Seal of Unity if you find one, as this will help to cover the plethora of order power costs in the mid and late game. Moving into the mid game, your top priority is to play Dazzling Aurora. Thankfully, the units included in this build are still useful when played from hand, but in order to develop a strong hold in the late game, you need this gear online as fast as possible. With Dazzling Aurora online, you'll want to use the abilities of your units to kill opposing units, whether it's straight up killing something with Harness Dragon, initiating a showdown with Deadwound Predator, or trading might with Card Inverse Snapvine. This deck has plenty of ways to wipe opposing units off the board before moving into battlefields. With these units out of the way, you'll look to gradually stock up both battlefields and begin holding. With action speed spells like Hidden Blade, Challenge, and Blast of Power, there are some solid defensive options available that can keep opponents from breaking through your holds through combat. Once everything is in place, closing out this core sequence with Divine Judgment will give you a massive advantage moving into the late game. Playing an 8-might unit on every turn for free with Dazzling Aurora is impossible for decks to keep up with when they only have access to a handful of runes. Throughout the late game, you want to hold battlefields as much as possible. If you come across any setbacks, then certainly move back to base and regroup when it makes sense to do so. Unlike Master Yi and Misfortune, who rely on defensive mind increases and ganking respectively, this iteration doesn't mind being a little more fluid between offense and defense. But if you're confident you can hold off opposing pushes, then consider holding your ground. With these big units on board, you should be utilizing spells like Hidden Blade and Blast of Power primarily to keep control of your opponent's board. Most decks will have a couple of units that can handle the mighty units in this deck, but these units can be easily countered with spells that outright kill them when they try to contest. An optional goal here is to play a second Dazzling Aurora if you think it's worth another 9 rune investment. In most situations, you'll only be able to play a second one if you're already in a winning position anyway, but it can be beneficial to have some reassurance when attempting to close out games. And finally, you can play any extra Mobilize or Catalyst of Aeons to ramp back up or draw cards if you're already on max runes. The early game for Garen Commander is all about setting up resources. The best way to do that is by opening up with Soaring Scout on turn 1. While Soaring Scout doesn't contribute much to the large armies you're looking to develop, the potential conquer into a rune channel when it dies is an effective start to any early game. You can also look to start your opening turn with Mobilize, as you'll want to play that spell along with Catalyst of Aeons throughout the game. Turns where you're not looking to conquer and have opted to set up more units in base are an excellent window for channeling runes. Playing Victor Leader as early as possible is ideal, as its presence in base will stretch the utility of your non-token units, and significantly increase the odds of proccing your legend ability. You won't usually look to include Victor in any conquer attempts, as he's an easy target for opponents, so the timing of exactly when to play him can be a little tricky, as 4 might and 1 power isn't cheap in the early game. Due to their cost of 3 energy, Faithful Manufactor and Noxian Drummer can't be played on your first turn, but closing out the early game with them and continuously playing copies throughout the game is the true lifeline of this deck. With this build being all about numbers, playing a token in base on play and a token every time you move into a battlefield goes a long way for successfully conquering and achieving the condition needed for your legend. Playing Confront whenever possible during the mid game will usually be a good idea. This deck lacks speed, but it excels in flooding the board with units. This helps Confront see immense amount of utility as a card that can put you a turn ahead on tempo without sacrificing much energy. 2 or 3 units in base isn't that threatening, but throw in 2 or 3 more and have them enter ready with Confront, and now you've caught opponents off guard. Darius Executioner serves as another solution to the slow speed of this deck thanks to its Legion ability. This deck doesn't rely on many big units, but they can certainly be a difference maker in specific matchups and when you need a heavier unit on the board or in combat. Basically functioning as a better version of the chosen champion, Darius Executioner is the best option when you have a potential push that needs a quick boost in might. Between Combat, Hidden Blade, and Imperial Decree, this deck has many effective ways of quickly killing opposing units. This gives a lot of value to Spoils of War, as it'll provide you with 2 additional cards on any given turn. This helps the identity of this build a lot, as it primarily struggles when it's limited in resources, but this build can achieve much more than expected with 12 runes and a big hand. And if Victor, Manufactor, and Drummer aren't enough, you should always have Recruit the Vanguard at the ready to boost your unit count with 4 tokens. While this spell doesn't always feel the most cost effective, it has incredible synergy with the core strategy of this deck and can also be an out to tricky hold situations. Thanks to all the tokens in this deck, Imperial Decree is a great option for clearing developed boards that were difficult to stop or unworthy of stopping throughout the development. This deck doesn't mind giving some points here and there, as it loves to see opposing units at battlefields as opposed to sitting in base. Whether the battlefields have been cleared or not, the combination of Confront and Garen Commander or cheap spells and Darius Executioner are the keys to the late game. The might increase for all units provided by these 2 core units serves as the foundation to every threatening push. And if you're in need of some extra strength, Decisive Strike is a solid closing spell to hold in your back pocket to ensure that a conquer goes smoothly. Garen's Dazzling Aurora iteration focuses mostly on single target combat with a slight control element with zero potential for widespread combat tricks. This gives him solid matchups into other top-end decks that have a hard time playing through Divine Judgment and other control cards. On the other hand, Garen Rugged really struggles into decks that can outpace him significantly, control his board state with positive trades, or overwhelm him with large unit counts. The best matchups for Garen Rugged are Wuju Blazeman, Nine-Tailed Fox, Unforgiven, and Blind Monk. Some neutral matchups are the Boss, Bounty Hunter, Daughter of the Void, and Swift Scout. And the worst matchups are Hand of Noxus, Loose Cannon, Darkchild, and Herald of the Arcane. Built all around big boards and conquers, Garen Commander loves matchups where he can set up uncontested and simplify the game down to traditional combat. This gives him strong matchups into decks that have few control options or little methods for handling large amounts of might. This oversimplification of the game leads to rough matchups against decks that can limit the potential of his armies and win combat through unconventional methods. The best matchups for Garen Rugged are Wuju Blazeman, Herald of the Arcane, Bounty Hunter, and Loose Cannon. Some neutral matchups are Blind Monk, the Boss, Hand of Noxus, and Unforgiven. And the worst matchups are Swift Scout, Darkchild, Nine-Tailed Fox, and Daughter of the Void. The mandatory cards for the Garen Rugged build are Might of Demacia and 1 Garen Rugged. Some cards you should definitely include are 3 Deadbloom Predator, 3 Harnessed Dragon, 3 Catalyst of Aeons, 3 Dazzling Aurora, 3 Mobilize, and 3 Divine Judgment. Some units that can help you round out your build are Carnivorous Snapvine, Mountain Drake, and Stormclaw Ursine. Other cards that are helpful are Challenge, Confront, Primal Strength, Sabotage, Blast of Power, Cold of Weak, Hidden Blade, Forge of Future, and Seal of Unity. You definitely want Aspirant's Climb as one of your 3 battlefields, and should slot in 2 of either Obelisk of Power, Sigil of the Storm, and the Grand Plaza as your 2nd and 3rd. And for runes, you should take an even 6-6 split between Body and Order. The mandatory cards for the Garen Commander build are Might of Demacia and 1 Garen Commander. Some cards you should definitely include in your list are 2 Decisive Strike, 2-3 Darius Executioner, 3 Faithful Manufactor, 3 Noxian Drummer, 3 Mobilize, 2-3 Recruit the Vanguard, and 2 Imperial Decree. Some cards that can round out your build are Daring Poro, Soaring Scout, Vanguard Captain, Victor Leader, Catalyst of Aeons, Challenge, Confront, Sabotage, Spoils of War, Cold of Weak, Facebreaker, Grand Stratagem, Hidden Blade, and Forge of Future. You definitely want Trifarian Warcamp as one of your 3 battlefields and should slot in Altar to Unity and Aspirant's Climb as your 2nd and 3rd. And for runes, you should take either 8 or 9 Order runes and 3 or 4 Body runes depending on your power distribution and preferred spells. If you're looking to play Might of Demacia, then here's the list we recommend. That wraps up our Might of Demacia deck profile. If you found this video helpful, feel free to like and subscribe. Good luck in your games, and thanks for watching.